The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Mario Kiriakou. I'm one of the founders here at Ratio and I'll be your presenter for today's topic, building a personalization proof of concept, taking your personalization efforts from zero to getting going. A few housekeeping rules for today's webinar. Today's session is recorded and I will send around a link to today's presentation in the next couple of days. We will have Q&A at the end of the presentation, so if you do have any questions which are triggered off the back of the content, feel free to pop those questions into the toolbar on the right hand side of your screen, and at the end of the webinar I'll take a look and I will endeavour to get back to you with an answer. So it leads me to start the presentation. We're probably going to have about 30, maybe 35 minutes tops, so I won't take up too much of your time. For those of you not familiar with Ratio, I'm not going to talk too much about us because I really want to get into the presentation, but we are a digital agency. Reason why we talk about today's topic, personalization, it's something that we endeavor to bake into a lot of the solutions that we build and deliver for a broad spectrum of clients that we work with. But you haven't come here to listen to about us, you've come to hear about today's topic. So let's get straight into it. So if you are joining today's presentation, I am going to take a wild leap that you have an interest in either the topic of personalization or looking to build out your own personalization efforts for your own organization. One of the reasons why I wanted to do today's webinar is that we've had a lot of feedback quite recently around some of the challenges of getting sophisticated personalization projects off the ground. And people have an idea in their mind about what they want a personalized experience to look like, but they're not sure how to get to there from nothing. So the idea around today's presentation is to provide a whistle-stop tour around some of the main foundational building blocks around building out your first proof of concept to get it live, test it, measure it, see the impact, and then look to build something more granular and more sophisticated over time. When we talk about developing a personalization proof of concept, for us there are a couple of building blocks. So there are 6 things which, from our experience, tend to come up time and time again, and we'll cover off in today's webinar. So people, having the right people involved, the right stakeholders, setting up the teams so they're working correctly together. Planning, we find that actually the success or failure in any, not just personalization, but any sort of marketing project is around the planning. So we tend to say it's 80% in the planning, 20% in the execution. The process that sits around it, production, so how do we then convert this into launch, placement, so where do we deliver personalized experiences, across what channels, across what touch points for our customers, and ultimately how do we measure whether any of this had any effects at all on what we want to achieve as a business, but also on what our end users and customers wanted from us as a business. So I'm going to start off with a couple of myths. So I'm guessing if you have joined today's presentation that either you've tentatively made a start at personalization, or it's something that is being kicked around and discussed internally within your companies. One of the things that we see come up is we can't do this for a bunch of reasons, and we tend to call these the myths that sit around personalization. So it's only for big players. Everyone's familiar with Amazon, and that actually puts off a lot of people. They assume that you need to be big organization to get anything off the ground. You don't have enough content for personalization. Yes, personalization requires content, but not as much as people think it does. It's too complex. I don't know where to start. That's a legitimate one in the sense that people generally don't know where to start, but it's a myth if you take the time to break down what the problem is and build out a framework to get started. It's too time consuming. You could say the same about any type of marketing tactic, such as marketing automation. It can be, you can spend as little or as much time on it as you want, but hopefully at the end of today's presentation, you'll see how we can build out something quite simply, quite easily, and quite quickly in order to just test the concept. And it's too expensive. Obviously, the technology is required to physically execute personalization, but the cost in technology and delivering personalization is coming down quite quickly. But why bother personalization at all? Why look to implement it alongside whatever other marketing tactics you are developing? A couple of reasons. You have a large audience segment. You have lots of people visiting your digital site, engaging with you across different multiple touch points. Ultimately, if you can look to deliver a more relevant one-to-one experience for different customer segments, different users, and deliver something relevant at each point throughout their journey, and obviously measure it, it will have multiple benefits in terms of what's important to you as a business. And of course, the benefits will vary depending on the type of website that you have. If you're quite CRO focused, so perhaps you're a retailer, things around improving conversion rates, helping reduce customer churn. If you're more B2B focused, conversion rates could be measured in terms of an increase in number of form completions or content consumed. But ultimately, we want to deliver something super relevant to different people who engage with you as a business in order to help increase your business objectives. The first challenge that we always see come up is we have lots and lots of customer personas, we have lots of traffic, we do a lot of marketing, we create lots of content. There's so much we could do, but we got no idea where we should start, how should we begin planning, what should we implement, and is it actually going to have any sort of measurable impact at all, or should we just do something else? So a couple of things which come up. Personalization for us is should sit within optimization. So traditionally, optimization is treated as A/B testing, and we're going to talk about later on how, for us, A/B testing and personalization are the reverse of the same coin. Personalization should be A/B tested. But where does optimization sit within your organization? Is optimization something which is important, or are your business efforts focused on different types of marketing? So is optimization important? Feeling overwhelmed around the possible personalization combinations, that's something which comes up time and time again. When you compute it, potentially you could have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of different personalization scenarios. And that can be off-putting because where do you start if you have 1,000 options? Hopefully at the end of today's presentation, you can see that actually we can, with a simple framework in place, you can break it down and just focus on what is going to have the highest impact. People. So when we talk about personalization, there's a tendency where when we're talking to organizations and marketing teams that the focus is around technology, that technology is the blocker to delivering personalization. Technology is important. You can't do much digitally without having the right tools in place and having it properly set up to deliver anything. But for us, people and planning actually are the main blockers to achieving anything. So people is super important. So in terms of people and around your initial POC efforts, a couple of things to bear in mind. Is this something which is purely within marketing? Our recommendation is that you look to have individuals involved from different parts of your business. So if you're a B2B organization, perhaps that's involving someone in terms of sales. If you're a not-for-profit organization, perhaps that's involving someone from the donations team, or if you're a membership organization, someone from the membership team. The reason why we say this is that when we're looking to build out what we want to deliver in terms of personalization, like who our customers are, who we're looking to target, what do they want to achieve and receive at any given point, it's quite important to have a sort of wider holistic view across the business around what do your customers want. There's a tendency within marketing to focus on purely what we know and control, whereas the reality is that as a business, information is diffused across wider teams. So if you can look to pull in stakeholders from different teams, it is a benefit. But ultimately, if you can identify one thing around one person you need involved in setting up your team, identify and pick your product owner. So we see efforts fail because it's diffused across a couple of different people and there's no single person owning and driving the effort. So if you're looking to build a proof of concept, appoint one person whose role is to, in effect, project manage or pull together the relevant stakeholders and build out the plans around this. Understanding your audience. We think we know our audience, and lots of people we speak to do know their audience and who their customers are, what they want from them as an organization. But in terms of specifically a POC around personalization, we need to dig a little bit deeper. So we have the tools and information that we need around what our customers want. So the example on screen is a very simple one that we did recently for a financial services organization who were looking to do something similar around personalization. So you can use this as a framework, or you can build out a separate one. We tend to use these as a sort of foundational element, not just for personalization, but giving you the information that you need for other marketing initiatives, such as deploying marketing automation, as well as just generally optimizing the website. So a couple of things to bear in mind. Identify a couple of key customer segments. So the one on the screen is an example for a financial services advisor. Understand what their user needs are. So what do they want from you as an organization at different points in their relationship and engagement with you as a business? What are your specific objectives as a business at those given points? Is it around capturing more leads, adding people to basket, driving donations, consuming more content? And then ask yourself, technically, in terms of website capability, what do we need in place in order to support those user needs, but also those business objectives that you have in place? Or do you actually have everything set up to deliver on your objectives? Four parts to this to identify your audience and creating your hypothesis list. Now, this is the one on the screen is a pure example, and as you all know, will vary from business to business. So a couple of key things to bear in mind when looking to build out and identify who you want to be targeting. Ask yourself, who do you want to be targeting as a customer segment? Common ones are things like prospect customers versus existing customers versus candidates looking for roles and jobs at your organization. The first part can be quite simple. How to identify them. This is something that we see people push back on and say, we've got access to all this analytics data. We know so much about what our customers are doing, how they're engaging with us, what content they're consuming. That being said, we still don't know who they are, even though we have access to all this information. And the very simple one is we have all this analytics data, but we can't separate out and identify who is a prospect customer versus someone who is a existing customer who's been shopping with us or doing business with us for a number of years. So in terms of personalization, identifying your segment is one part. The second part is making sure we can identify who they are digitally so we can technically deliver that experience to them as a business. So for example, for a prospect customer, you might have it might be their first visit, so that you have no identifiable information about them having been there before. If it's an existing customer, it might be a logged in user, or if they've completed a form, you may cross-check against a CRM record to identify whether they're an existing customer of your business. The point is, identifying your segment is one part, but actually do you have a way of identifying who they are within your means? We'll talk about later on about high priorities and low priorities, and how to focus on ones on hypotheses and an approach where you prioritize what drives the highest level of impact with the lowest level of effort from yourselves. Once you identified 1 and 2, the fun part is building out hypotheses for these customer segments. And this is nothing particularly sophisticated. It could be as simple as your marketing team or your key team who are involved in this POC sitting down in a meeting room with a couple of post-it notes with your audience segments, and identifying what type of experience you think this audience member should receive based on where they are with the organization. The fourth one is something which we see people forget to add, but we think is the most important. So success metrics around your hypotheses and the types of personalization experiences you want to deploy. It's all well and good setting up a personalized experience, delivering it, looking at it and going, wow, that's amazing, we got it off the ground. But then what happens when you get the question, so what? What impact did that actually have? Did that drive more conversions? Did that have a measurable impact on what we want to achieve as a business? So it's super, super important to put success metrics around the different scenarios you're looking to deploy. An old quote, but super relevant, as I was just talking about success metrics: if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. But in terms of personalization, if we can't measure it, we have no idea whether it's driving a positive or a negative impact on our audience. And the way we say to achieve that is to put a data foundation in place that enables you to measure the success or not of any sort of marketing initiative across your website. And the foundation should include, and we'll go through an example in a second, what features across your website are important to your users, which features are not being used. This comes up quite often, that people assume parts of the website are being actively engaged with, perhaps content, or you created certain interactive features, but actually based on analytics, it's no one's using them. And which features are most helpful in driving conversion and pushing people further along their engagement and journey with you as a business. Analytics is your, we like to say, your first port of call when it comes to analyzing or identifying how your customers are interacting. So depending on what system you use, whether it's Omnichannel or psychoanalytics, or the most common one, Google Analytics, make sure you have your customer segment set up, have tracking set up, and look at your analytics first in order to identify what content is being consumed, what people are engaging with, and what people are not engaging with. So now I'm going to run through an example of a measurement framework. And a couple of things this should include: digital objective, website goals, and importantly, KPIs. And again, this will vary from business to business. There's no one size fits all. It doesn't have to be as in depth as this. It could be more in depth. It could be more granular. The point is, you need to have a base measurement framework in place before you start building out your personalization efforts. This is why we always say 80% of the success of any project is in the planning and only 20% in the implementation. So, for example, digital objectives, identify these. It could be around personalization being used to reinforce our credibility or highlight our expertise or USPs. If that is your objective, ask yourself what are the website goals which correspond to those objectives. For example, we're looking to reinforce the experience and credibility of our people. If perhaps you're a law firm where you sell the expertise within your business, and what KPIs sit around that so we can actually measure the impact. It can be things like the click-through rate from services content or engagement with people content and traffic off the back of that. As you go through this, you can see how it can be quite. If you're a business with lots of different customer segments, potentially you could have a very large measurement framework. I would focus on building a measurement framework around perhaps one or two customer segments and around just a couple of objectives. Otherwise, you will start. Danger is you'll move into that area of inertia where you say, "Oh God, I've got so much I could potentially measure." Keep it quite small. But where should you prioritize your efforts? Where should you focus your efforts? We tend to say that as an organization that if you're looking to build out your personalization POC, you want to focus your efforts on areas that have the greatest impact with the least amount of effort from yourselves. For example, this could be you might identify that if you could deliver X personalized experience, it would deliver enormous impact, but it requires an integration with a bunch of other different systems because the data we need to access is held far away. So great impact, but great complexity. What we want to do is build out a priority list of where we order your initial hypotheses around it's going to have great impact, but actually it's a relatively low-hanging fruit. We don't need to do a bunch of work in order to integrate a bunch of different systems. We've got the data easily accessible, and we can deploy something and measure it and see whether it's having any sort of impact. Personalization, by its very nature, is designed to deliver a one-to-one experience for you as an individual. That being said, ultimately, we are looking to use personalization as a marketing tactic to drive business impact for you as a business. Now, if the audience you're looking to target is super, super small, then all of this effort is, to one extent, wasted, because the question to ask yourself is, if it's too small a customer audience, what measurable impact is it really going to have on us as a business? So on the screen, I've got an example of there's only 10 people within your grouping. Is it worth the effort? Well, probably not. If it's 1,000 people, then the answer is it's likely to have a greater impact, which is why we tend to see personalization as an optimization effort, that we are looking to convert a percentage of your audience into executing on whatever given action that you have set up for that scenario. Again, just to reiterate what I said before, we do need a large enough audience to drive impact. Again, this is why your analytics is your source of truth in identifying whether a customer segment that you wish to target is of sufficient number to justify your efforts within building out this POC. Personal experience exists beyond just web. So when we're talking about building out a personalized or personal experience POC, you can just think about your website because it's obviously one of your biggest channels. But as an organization, you're most likely using a bunch of different channels to interact with, engage with your end customers. The most common one is email. So web and email. And the reason why we say personalization exists beyond just web is that ultimately we want to get to a point where we are integrating, combining and connecting our different data sources. And if I'm using the example of web and email, there are different areas of your business where your customers are engaging with you. So web will capture their web analytics data, but then if your marketing team is also messaging them via email, there's a bunch of different data sets that are stored separately which are not connected with your website. The reason why we say exist beyond web, we want to have access to your different data stores so we have a richer pool of customer data so we can be even more personal when we're interacting with customers. So as a marketer, identify what your customer touchpoints are. Again, analytics for this is a great way of doing it, but identify how you're currently interacting with your customers. What are your outbound tools that you use to engage with? Obviously, it could be more than just web. It could be email. If you have web applications, or you have web apps, whatever. Just identify what your touchpoints are. I'm going to run through a couple of examples of what a possible experience could look like for a end user. So scenario one, we want to deliver content for a website visitor based on what we think they want in terms of content. So this is about leveraging predictive personalization. So this is about analyzing what content an individual has used before. So we are tagging content around perhaps certain themes, and then creating personalization scenarios around you have looked at X content before, we think Y content might be relevant. So that's one example. One that we see come up for B2B companies, but it's also relevant for transactional based businesses. If you have broken down the customer journey into funnels, is how can we deliver a personal experience at different points within the funnel? This one is slightly more complex, depending on how your systems are integrated. For a funnel example for a B2B company where you have CRM as your single source of truth, CRM data will enable you to identify where a user is within their opportunity pipeline with you as an organization. Perhaps they're a lead, perhaps they're an existing customer, perhaps they're being actively nurtured as an opportunity. And then creating personalized scenarios based on where they are with you as an organization. So if there's someone who's being nurtured as an opportunity, perhaps we want to provide a more content, either across email or web, that will reinforce our credibility as a business. Which leads me into omnichannel personalization, which sounds a bit fancy, but really is around how do we deliver personalization across more than one channel. So I'm going to run through the customer scenario first. So customer A, she visits your website for the first time, so we know she's a first-time visitor. This person, she will return at some point, browse some content, download a white paper, complete a form. Returns, looks at more content, perhaps initiates a conversation with sales, and then eventually purchases your services and wares. An example of the type of experience we could deliver based on information that will be captured. Based on that first-time visit, we've identified which company that she's come from based on her IP, if we have IP tracking in place. Because we're able to identify her specific company, her next visit involves a personalized scenario based on her specific company. So this is not saying, hi, I know you're from Microsoft. Perhaps it's identifying what industry that they're from and providing content that perhaps is industry relevant. And then a subsequent communication, email based on content that's been triggered before, and then an automatic email that's triggered based on an updated sales conversation in the CRM. So when you're looking at your customer journey and the different touch points, also think about what information that you're capturing, which gives you an idea around when you're building out your personalization hypothesis of what they should be experiencing at each touch point. The role personalization plays with your customer funnel. As we said before, what we're looking to do is to deliver personalization experiences across different touch points and across different moments in their engagement with you as a business. Whether it's the second visit or the 100th visit or they're a long-time customer, map out your digital touch points, your funnel, how they could potentially engage with you, and that will give you an idea around building out hypotheses around the different elements of your funnel. So perhaps you want to map out what type of experience they should visit when they've interacted with certain content, or when they've achieved a certain lead score, or they've identified themselves as interested in certain content categories. Performance. I mentioned before around measurement frameworks, and it's not measured, it's not managed. When setting up KPIs, ask yourself, is the KPI the most specific possible representation that the website goal has been achieved? I gave an example of a measurement framework before, but the truth be told, every measurement framework will look differently for every organization. So don't look at examples and say, oh, it's very difficult for us to produce that. Look to build out something that is pertinent and relevant for your business. The reason why at the beginning of today's presentation I said that personalization is a part of optimization, because for us it is a way of optimizing and delivering value for you as a business. And where we see efforts fall down for users who've delivered, who are actively delivering personalization, is that they're unable to answer what impact did this have. And one of the base reasons that is that personalization efforts are not being A/B tested. People are used to A/B testing, but they're less used to A/B testing personalization scenarios. So if you want to answer what measurable impact did the scenarios drive for our end users, we need to have an A variant and a B variant. We need to have the original variant and the personalized variant, so we can measure what measurable impact this had. But that brings me to the end of today's presentation. So we've been about 30 minutes. So bang on time. We've got time for a few questions. So I'll just double check to see if any questions have come through. As I said at the beginning of today's webinar, if you have any questions, you could pop those into the toolbar on the right-hand side. Okay, doesn't look like we had any questions today, so you get a few minutes back of your day. Firstly, thank you very much for attending today's webinar. I really appreciate when people take time out of the day to come along. As I said, today's session is recorded and I will be sharing this within a couple of days. So thank you very much, and I will speak to you all soon. Bye-bye.